niệm, để tưởng nhớ các bậc tiền nhân đã dày công dựng nước và giữ nước, để tưởng nhớ đến các chiến sĩ quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đã anh dũng chiến đấu, hy sinh để bảo vệ tự do cho miền Nam Việt Nam, để tưởng nhớ những đồng bào ruột thịt đã bỏ mình trên biển cả, trong rừng sâu, trên bước đường vượt biên vượt biển tìm tự do, và để tưởng nhớ đến những người chiến sĩ dân chủ đã hy sinh để phục quốc, quan phục quê hương. Và chúng ta cũng tưởng nhớ đến các chiến sĩ quân đội Hoàng gia Úc 524 vị đã tử trận, đã hy sinh để bảo vệ miền Nam Việt Nam của chúng ta.
sacrifice of our father in South Vietnam to protect the freedom that we all enjoy today, and also to pay respect to our ancestors who created the great country of Vietnam, to protect it, and all our people who have lost their lives to protect the freedom and democracy of South Vietnam. Immediate Prime Commander.
Xin cảm ơn toàn thể quý vị. Chúng ta sẽ tiếp tục đứng trong cái tư thế này để chúng ta cứ cầm những cái biểu ngữ, và sau đây sẽ có một số người phát biểu của chúng tôi xin giải thích với một số các đồng hương Úc. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering why we're here today, we are the Vietnamese Australian community in New South Wales. We would like to stay here. As you see, most of our signs are saying exactly why we're here today. We're here only for two purposes. From yesterday until today, there's many of us who are camped here from yesterday afternoon just to start a hunger strike, to ask the Australian government, the Australian Federal Parliament in Canberra, to raise our voices of concern regarding the voiceless people in Vietnam, in the communists of Vietnam, and to call upon the Australian government and our elected representatives to condemn an increasing oppressions of the current regimes in Hanoi. The only reason why we're here on a very short notice is that recently there's been one arrest, house arrest of a Buddhist Hoa Hao follower. What happened is while in police custody, within 24 hours, that person has been sent home, not alive. When he got detained, got arrested, he was really healthy, a normal human being. However, after 24 hours, he's been returned home to his family as a dead person. And the only reason why the local police giving out a statement for the reason of his death is that he killed himself by suicide. And his act of suicide is very, very ridiculously given to in the news and media, by cutting himself, slashing his throat with a paper cutting knife. How is that possible? When you're slashing yourself with a paper cutting knife, using his left hand, slashing it once, and then twice again, and he still survived. So what he did, he's changing his hand, slashing again a number of times to kill himself until he's bleeding until he's unconscious and fallen to the ground and dead. His head also has been hit by some other objects, and then the government is only giving us the statement that he's dead on a self-inflicted wound and suicide. How is that possible for a normal human being with a given act of doing that on his own under security and police custody? That is one of the recent cases. There are many cases in Vietnam now that the people of Vietnam, a normal citizen, getting a house arrest, and within 24 hours they've been returned home either with a broken ribs, hit in the head, or they've been given back to their family as a dead body. And the reason is that they hang themselves with a thread, or they hang themselves with a telephone wire. How is that possible? It's amazing how the Vietnamese government coming up with all these reasons for why death in custody. That's what it is. As the Vietnamese community in Australia, we enjoy our freedom. We left Vietnam because of communists. But here again, this traumatized news that the Vietnamese government has been released and giving out to us as an outsider. We hear this, we don't believe it. And many of the people in Vietnam don't believe it either. But what can they do as a communist country, government country? The next things that they do is that if you see there's a few more posters of 2 Catholic priests. They have been leading a group just following the people of their parish. They want to go down on the street, rally against a company called Formosa, a steel country who's been polluting the environment, has been polluting all along the 200 kilometer of the Vietnam coast. And what they did is that they just followed the response of the people in the parishes, because as you see, 200 kilometer of Vietnam coast is being governed and being maintained by the Vietnamese fishermen. And most of these people, fishery and the oceans, clean water is their way of survival, their way of living. However, the steel company has been polluted this coastal area, and thousands of fish, birds, and many other living creatures along those coastal areas has been turned up dead. How is that possible that the Vietnamese government turned a blind eye to it? That is why we cannot stand still against these environmental pollutions, and that's why we're here today. We worry for these 2 priests who has leading those rallies, and the government, the local police, has given a warning letter to the diocese of these police where they work, stopping them from doing any further liturgy that they are allowed to do. This is like almost like the government is dictating the Catholic diocese on who is allowed to practice their religion. As you can see, the first example is that the Buddhist Hoa Hảo follower detained by the government, police government, 24 hours, turned back dead. We worry, the Vietnamese community in Australia now heard all this news. We're hearing them because we got the facts that the government already issued official notice warning these 2 priests. If they continue to practice their religious liturgy, they will be detained. And we worry if they get caught, if they're house arrested, we are afraid that within 24 hours, again, their death story may be one of the very obvious ones. Suicide while in police custody. And their suicide could be anything ranging from what I mentioned earlier, could be just from a telephone cord to hanging themselves, or again, the latest one is just slashing himself their throat with a paper knife. How ridiculous is that? In Australia, I believe there's coroner, there's always many investigations why death in police custody. But in Vietnam, the simple return of answer is that death in police custody because of self-inflicted wound or suicide. And the next thing is that even the family members trying to raise their voice against the injustice is that the police will force them to get the family to get to bury those corpses. They wouldn't allow the family to go on investigation on why these injustice been happening, why in police custody. The police somehow sending people, making the family has to put the body into burial. Why? Because they want to bury up what they did. They want to bury up all this evidence that they inflicted on this human being, an innocent human being. That's what I believe. How is that possible when they and Vietnam government itself is trying to joining up to the human rights. They put themselves up to join as part of the Human Rights Council. As an Australian, the Vietnamese Australian, we urge the Australian government to respect what we're doing here. Australian, the taxpayer, we Vietnamese, we work here, we live here, we enjoy our freedom, but we're also paying our taxes. And our tax, our money is going to the Australian government. And guess what? The government also spending like millions of dollars giving aid, foreign aid to Vietnam. And we only request the Australian government to look carefully with our funding, our aid, overseas aid. If our aid is going into a government like a Communist of Vietnam, we're only supporting those Communist Party. We're only supporting the members of the Communist Party to getting stronger, to their own pockets. And they can continue to suppress our own religious leaders. They continue to suppress our own religious followers. And the next thing is that the people of Vietnam will suffer. The actual citizen of Vietnam will suffer. And that's what we don't want to be. The next thing is the expansion of China. If you look at it, we're already selling, giving the rights of our land to many of the foreigners, especially for the people of the north. The Vietnamese citizens are now speechless or voiceless against them. Anything that they go down out into the street to rally against them, they get persecuted. They get purging, as well as recently. This never happened in Australia before, but maybe I go back a little bit a while ago, where in Vietnam, the people of the community start coming out because they've been paid by the communist government. If you don't come out, and if you don't come like say bad thing about these two priests, you are also likely being persecuted as well. And they recently they pay bribes to the local people and their Communist Party to join in with the local to rally against these priests for their practices. And they also giving out like sentences, like if the priests continue to do that, they're giving out a free sentence of either getting a life sentence or 20 years in jail. How is that possible for a human just to giving out a verdict like that? In Australian law, I know that we have to attend court and you have to prove him guilty. On the other hand, in Vietnam, they're making people rally against it, and they just want to set a law precedent that they can actually persecute a priest for practicing like this. And in the local custodies, as you can hear in many cases, that they are persecuting them while in custody, and then they're just returning a very false or ridiculous statement that they killed themselves while in custody. That is one of the reasons why we're here today. We are not a protester, or we can't do a speech forever, but I urge everyone who are here today, just any media, anyone who has seen this, just look at the people who are here, who attended the hunger strike from yesterday until today, and later today. We hope that many of the parliaments, the member of parliament inside will come out and join us in this rally against the oppressions, against religious freedom.
Yeah. Want to say, down with the Vietnamese communists?
Down, down, down!
Down with the Vietnamese communists?
Down, down, down!
Down with the Vietnamese communists?
Down, down, down!
Down with the China communists?
Down, down, down!
Down with the China communists?
Down, down, down!
Human rights! Human rights! Democracy! Democracy! Human rights! Democracy! Freedom! 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 Down with the Vietnamese communists!
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for a very important mission. We're here in the effort to try to save two parish priests in central Vietnam. I'm talking about Father Đặng Hữu Nam and Father Nguyễn Đình Thục. Ladies and gentlemen, these two priests spoke up and took the matter to the street on behalf of our people. And in return, they were facing or actually they are facing the proposed sentence by the People Court, organized by Illegal Criminal Act of Vietnamese government. And we're looking at a death sentence for one and a life imprisonment for the other. And the only crime they committed was to speak up for the right of the people of Vietnam. We're here to speak up for those people who cannot speak because their right has been taken away from them. There is no democracy and freedom of speech or the freedom of protest in Vietnam. Right now in Vietnam, the communist regime has been organizing children, school teacher, undercover cops, and political advisor to force out the people onto the street to rally against these two fathers, proposing death sentence on one and life imprisonment on the other. This is an act of terrorism. This is an act of oppression. This is something that we will not allow in Australia. Therefore, we ask in Australia not to support such regime. Any financial aid sent to Vietnam must go together with a condition. And that condition will be the human rights, democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of protest to all people of Vietnam. Let's give them that right. You might not have heard about this, but it was only 12 months ago. Formosa is a Taiwanese operated, financially funded by China. They have been illegally dumped toxic waste into the ocean of Vietnam, destroying some 200 kilometers of coastline on this eastern side of Vietnam. The whole marine habitat has been devastated. Hundreds of tons of dead fish has been washed ashore. The tourist-related industry along the coastline, impacting over 171,000 Vietnamese, have been corrupted. Some completely corrupted and bankrupt. Financially ruined are the facing of over 170,000 Vietnamese people. The toxic was so severe, we have counted over 14,000 Vietnamese fishing boats have been severely contaminated with the toxic waste. They have to be destroyed and put these people out of business. We were looking at over 40,000 Vietnamese people along the coastline of Vietnam on the eastern side, contaminated, infected by the toxic waste. They had to be hospitalized out of their own pocket. The communist regime had done nothing about it. These two fathers, Father Đặng Hữu Nam and Father Nguyễn Đình Thục, took this matter to the street, rally against Formosa, demanding compensation to all impacted people, demanding for remedy to the coastline that has been corrupted and damaged by the toxic waste. In return, they are now facing a death sentence and a life imprisonment. We're pleading to the government of Australia to put our concern forward to the government of Vietnam, or the communist regime we call them. Do not send any more aid to Vietnam financially without any condition. Any aid sent to Vietnam must cooperate with a condition, and that is the human right, democracy, and freedom of speech. We need to save these two priests. They are the two people who are brave enough to speak up for the people who cannot speak because their rights have been taken away from them. If you look further down on our photo here, one Hoa Hao followers. He was arrested by the cops with no sentence. 24 hours later, he came home in a coffin. He's got his throat cut, slashed several times by the police. That is the kind of ISIS terrorism happening in Vietnam among the Vietnamese Cộng, organized and ruled by the communist ruling of Vietnam right now. So we're asking for the government of Australia to convey our concern to the regime in Vietnam. We demand the regime of Vietnam, the Communist Party of Vietnam, to respect the human rights, to respect the Geneva Convention for the people who have their right to protest, the right to speech, the right of religion, and to say Father Đặng Hữu Nam and Father Nguyễn Đình Thục Human rights for Vietnam. Democracy.
For Vietnam.
Democracy.
For Vietnam.
Human rights.
For Vietnam.
Human rights.
For Vietnam.
Human rights.
For Vietnam.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the budget week, which is a very important week for Australia. The government of Australia counting every cent, every dollar to make sure that every end is made. You look at the financial ruin of over 170,000 Vietnamese people who have lost all their earnings, all their savings, and they are starving. The regime in Vietnam have done nothing about it. We demand for compensation from Formosa to every single Vietnamese people affected by the toxic waste of the ocean. Human rights! Human rights! Human rights! Democracy! Democracy! Democracy!
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We've been requested by our neighbor protest that we're gonna be quiet for the next 15 minutes for them to hold a press conference. So in sharing of this space, we will again we'll just keep quiet for now. Kính thưa quý vị, chúng ta có thể là sẽ trong giây lát chúng ta sẽ ngồi yên, sẽ im lặng một chút xíu để cho bên kia họ cũng muốn là có một cái báo cáo truyền thông của họ đó, thì mình phải giống như là mình làm việc chung với nhau, thì nếu mà trong chúng ta im một chút xíu thì để cho họ 15 phút sau chúng ta sẽ tiếp tục cái chương trình biểu tình chúng ta. Okay, we will be quiet for now. Thank you. All your team.
Thank you very much.
No worries. We work together. We fight together.
Yes.
Right, fight for our own rights. Democracy for Vietnam, human rights for Vietnam, especially the question of freedom of religion.